So let's check in on what's happening in the Senate right now. Here, not much.
Be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, over the next couple of days, the Senate will consider two more of the president's nominees. Kristi Noem to be Secretary of Homeland Security and Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense. A former House member and current governor of the great state of South Dakota, Kristi brings both experience and commitment to her new role. Mr. President, one of the biggest challenges facing the Department of Homeland Security right now is securing our nation's border. 4 years of record-breaking illegal immigration at our southern borders left our country vulnerable to a whole host of security concerns, from terrorist entries to cross-border criminal activity like drug trafficking. Fixing this crisis and restoring respect for the rule of law is one of President Trump and Republicans' top priorities, and is going to require a decisive and committed leader at the Department of Homeland Security. I believe Kristi has everything it takes to undertake this task. Mr. President, we're also considering the nomination of Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense. A veteran of the Army National Guard who served tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Mr. Hegseth will bring a warrior's perspective to the role of Defense Secretary and will provide much-needed fresh air at the Pentagon.
Going to be tight.
Gone will be the days of woke distractions. The Pentagon's focus will be on war fighting. Mr. Hegseth will concentrate on restoring American strength and repairing the deficiencies in our readiness. As our first president said more than 200 years ago, and I quote, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace," end quote. And in a world that has grown increasingly unstable over the past few years, our priority has to be ensuring that the United States military is prepared to meet and defeat any threat. I will continue to ensure that the Senate works as quickly as possible to get President Trump's team in place. Mr. President, before I close, I also want to mention the March for Life, which will be held today in Washington, D.C. As they do every year, tens of thousands of Americans from all across the country will flood the streets of Washington to witness the goodness and value of every human life. The March for Life is just one small facet of the pro-life movement, but it is a key facet because we need this public witness. Abortion happens behind closed doors, and so it can be all too easy to forget that it's happening, to forget that every day in this country babies are being killed by abortion. The Pro-Abortion Guttmacher Institute reports that there were more than 1 million abortions in 2023 alone.
Wow.
1 million. That's
2
a lot of
Wyomings.
lives lost.
2 Wyomings gone.
A lot of love lost. And we need to be reminded of this. And so I'm tremendously grateful for the tens of thousands of marchers in Washington, D.C. today who are here to remind us of the terrible cost of abortion and of the infinite value and worth of every human being. I'm looking forward to addressing the March for Life in person later today, and I want to give a special shout out to those who have traveled from South Dakota to be here in Washington. And to all pro-lifers, those here in Washington today and those around the country, I want to say thank you. There's no greater work than standing up for those who cannot stand up and defend themselves. And I'm grateful for everything you do for moms and for their babies. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alster-Brooks.
So kicking things off, the Senate Majority Leader, the guy replacing Mitch McConnell, is kicking things off there. So we'll see if we get votes. I think they said that they were going to have Hegseth vote today. Just trying to find if there was a list of who's voting where, but I think it's going to be tight, especially with 2 Republicans, the squishy Collins and the squishy Murkowski, not jumping in and supporting the president. So, and I saw a question, from Kerry B. He would just pick another person. They would just have to pick someone else. I think there's not a lot of practical. I mean, obviously, you want your confirmation, your nominees to be there because you think they're the star, right? The star quarterback. But Trump would have another, he'd pick somebody else. It would be the same thing that happened with Gates, essentially. Now, politically, if you lose a confirmation hearing, it is deemed like a political loss. Like, wow, the Senate is snubbing Trump. They're not following his lead. There's a civil war amongst the Republicans. So I think it's more of a political consequence than really stopping the government. I mean, Of course, you could say that the person who would come in to replace Pete Hegseth may not be as capable as Pete Hegseth, but maybe they are just as capable. So, you might, I think it's kind of the same thing that happened with Matt Gaetz and Pam Bondi. It's like maybe you want Gaetz in there for a certain reason, but Pam Bondi's great for another reason. So we'll keep our eye on that.